If you walk down the high street of any major city in the Western world today, you'll notice something deeply unsettling. On digital billboards and storefront screens, everything looks fine. Stock markets are near record highs. Unemployment is officially low. GDP numbers are still growing. But when you look at the people walking past those screens, you see a very different reality. You see stress on their faces as they hesitate before buying food that now costs nearly double what it did just 3 years ago. You see empty stores and for lease signs spreading across commercial streets. And you feel a quiet, shared sense of dread. A feeling that no matter what politicians or central bankers say, something underneath is breaking. This contradiction is not accidental. It is the gap between two economies. There is the official economy, where asset prices rise and numbers look healthy. And there is the lived economy, where everyday people struggle to survive. This gap is the visible symptom of a collapse that began nearly 20 years ago and was carefully hidden from public view. We are not just entering another recession. We are reaching the end of a specific economic era. For the last 15 years, the global economy has been kept alive artificially. Not through productivity, not through innovation, but through cheap debt and printed money. It was economic life support. Now that support is failing and the patient is waking up to a terminal diagnosis. To understand why this is happening in 2025 and 2026, we must ignore daily headlines and focus on one thing: the price of money. For most of human history, money had a price. If you wanted to borrow capital, you paid interest that reflected risk. That interest rate acted like gravity. It kept the economy grounded in reality. If a business couldn't generate enough profit to pay interest on its debt, it failed. Its assets were sold to someone more capable. This process is known as creative destruction. It is how capitalism evolves. In 2008, following the global financial crisis, central banks made a historic decision. Terrified of deflation, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and others cut interest rates to zero. In some cases, they went even lower. This was supposed to be temporary, an emergency measure, a single dose of morphine. Instead, it became permanent. The zero interest rate policy era had begun. When money becomes free, reality breaks. Saving no longer makes sense, so capital is pushed into risk. Real estate prices exploded, not because homes became more valuable, but because mortgages became cheap. Stock markets detached from earnings. Speculative assets ballooned into trillion-dollar markets. This distortion created what we now call the everything bubble. Cheap money created a new kind of business. Zombie companies. These firms earn just enough to survive and pay interest on their debt, but not enough to ever repay it. In a normal economy, they would fail. In the zero-rate era, they simply refinanced endlessly. They consumed capital and labor without producing growth. By 2024, nearly 20% of companies in the US and Europe fit this definition. They were safe only as long as interest rates stayed near zero. The pandemic-era money printing finally broke the dam. Energy prices surged. Food costs exploded. Housing became unaffordable. Central banks panicked. Interest rates rose faster than at any time in the last 40 years. The free money era ended overnight, but the debt remained. Now we face the maturity wall. Trillions of dollars in corporate and commercial real estate loans are coming due in 2025 and 2026. These loans must be refinanced, not at 2%, but at 6, 7, or 8%. For zombie companies, the math no longer works. Survival turns into instant insolvency. The first visible collapse is commercial real estate. Office buildings once worth hundreds of millions are selling for a fraction of their former value. Not because the buildings disappeared, but because the debt became impossible to service. This is why the economy feels like it's falling apart. The artificial support has been removed. China was the engine of global growth for 2 decades, but that growth was built on a property bubble. Real estate became the primary savings account for Chinese households. Nearly 70% of household wealth was tied to property. Developers borrowed heavily, pre-sold unbuilt apartments, and relied on rising prices. Now the bubble has burst. Millions of homes are unfinished. Developers are defaulting. Household wealth is evaporating. China has entered a balance sheet recession. In the US and Europe, the crisis is centered on office real estate. Remote work destroyed the economic logic of skyscrapers. Vacancy rates hit record highs. Banks hid losses through accounting tricks. But when loans mature, reality arrives. Keys are returned, defaults spread. Regional banks, not mega banks, face the greatest danger. Central banks are trapped. Lower rates and inflation returns. Keep rates high and the system collapses. They have one tool left: control. Central bank digital currencies are not harmless upgrades. They are programmable money. Money that can be restricted, expired, or controlled. This has happened before. In 1933, the US government made private gold ownership illegal. Citizens were forced to surrender real wealth for paper money. When governments run out of economic solutions, they turn to force.